I've laughed at a lot of the form factors that I've seen prototypes of. I think they're hilarious. They're like a necklace. It's like, I don't know that I see myself wearing that as a patient, but some people will. Some people will wear the glasses. Some people will have that augmented reality of the information in their field of view. And that's kind of what's coming next.
Today, we have a guest that I'm very excited to speak with. We have Emily Lewis, who is a phenomenal individual who is wildly intelligent, knows machine learning and generative AI, and has recognized the need to involve patients and also is part of the solution on doing so. So with all of that said, Emily, very excited to have you.
Thanks so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be here. I am so passionate about that topic, so I am so thrilled to be digging into that with you here today.
Yeah, tell me what made you even kind of recognize that big need? Where is it?
Yeah.
You being a patient or a personal story? And how did you bridge that with what you do so well with machine learning and AI?
I mean, there are so many tools flooding the market right now. They're helping clinicians, right? And I love that. And that there's a huge need for that. And we have a shortage of physicians and clinicians. But, there's a big movement out there from Grace Cordovano and the Lighthouse Collective, or the Light Collective, sorry. And it is, how do we bring patients into this fold? How do we have LLMs and generative AI also help patients become better patients? They're usually the experts in their condition, especially in things like rare disease. So why don't we tap them to really have them filter their ideas and their thoughts and their symptom tracking to be more informative for the clinician? So how can we get them to better express, what they're going through and have it be more streamlined for the physician to really look at? And how do we ensure they're an equal partner with their clinician in their care? How can they be a better decision maker or decision supporter with the clinician? I mean, these are all ideas that are not novel, but we've been striving towards for a long time. And I think we're at the precipice now of where LLMs can really play a big role in facilitating a better relationship with that clinician. And so we're seeing companies like Abridge come out with a Bridge for Patients app where patients can record their conversations with their clinicians and have, a record that is in a 5th to 8th grade reading level, and allows them to really be exercising agency in their relationship with their physician. So I'm just super excited about what's next in the multimodality that, LLMs provide that will allow them to be more educated and more, health literate to be able to, like I said, be more of an equal partner in their relationships with clinicians.
And when you say multimodality kind of approach, when we think, or I think when some think of LLMs, they think, okay, it's language, and it's the ability to be able to have a message delivered in a certain context or contextual manner that it's received and understood by patient, and then patient to communicate back to doctor. When you talk about multimodal, tell us a little bit about that and help people appreciate why that's so exciting for us.
It allows people to digest things a little better so they can receive content in a way that's their learning style, right? So some people may be more audio, and so they might generate a podcast, using Notebook LLM to really digest and understand a topic better. Or they could have a visual aid. So you're having AI generate infographics and visual aids, and then you're having chatbots that give like a return question and answer, or an avatar, for example. So being able to tailor the content to the recipient, I think, is such a superpower for this technology.
I will say one of the things that I think has helped foster my relationship with patients is being able to talk about something in a way that is understood. So there are a lot of people that know a lot of things that I don't know, right? But if I know the basics of how a car works or an HVAC system or football or whatever that thing may be, I can somehow, and I think many of us can find the analogies to then help appreciate like what the mind doesn't know. The mind doesn't know what the eyes haven't seen. And I've learned humbly that as much as I'll say immunotherapy can cause anything, diarrhea, rash, this, that, and the other, you're 6 months in and then somebody very off the cuff mentions they saw a dermatologist about a rash, or that they think they got a GI bug, it's week 3. And I'm like, well, I told you that, we can't even begin to understand how you can't make those connections for the same everyday problems you've had for 65 years and think that it's IO therapy if you didn't have the 14 years of training. So I get very excited about that aspect of it. What do you see, though, as kind of this nudge or reminder of a revisitation? Is that something that potentially, AI can assist with, or avatars in between the visits, that kind of reminder to bring it top of mind? Hey, you need to change your oil, for example, with the car. Some people got burned once and then still forget, later down the road. Is it something that physicians need to be like even trained and taught on with LLMs? How do you see that happening?
Absolutely. So AI is going to be a huge player in connecting care in between visits, right? So while the patient, lives 3 hours away from their academic medical center where they see their specialist, for example, that AI will be checking in with them, monitoring their symptoms. They can take selfies of their face. They can record audio samples of their voice, and the AI can distill insights from that that'll be helpful for the clinician to use when they then go to the next visit. And it can record, what it thinks are relevant insights from those from that monitoring. It also, just like you get a nudge when you've been still for too long on your, iWatch, it will do that nudging that says, it acts more like a partner rather than just like a nag. Hopefully, it's providing that behavioral support that is allowed for self-management. So I think these tools will provide sort of a level of confidence with the folks using them, and kind of a feedback loop where they can put in a goal. And just like on your Peloton, you get a reward when you are on your third bike ride of the week. Similarly, AI can enable those same kinds of that gamification of feedback to encourage folks to engage in healthy behaviors and feel like they're more collaborating than being compliant. Because
No
nobody,
doubt.
I mean, of course you want to be compliant, but it's more like you're in this together, and that AI tool is a partner with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like vitals sound objective, but really, just even doing it correctly, like the blood cuff, and is it accurate, and are they always walking the stairs and getting it immediately? Like all of this stuff can throw things off. And speaking on that same note, I know you've spoken about, bias basically, and being a steward of clean data, and kind of, again, considering the things the mind wouldn't know if the eyes haven't seen or ears haven't heard. What are some of the things, one, that would be concerning, and two, how are we ensuring that they aren't kind of, muddying the waters, so to speak, on how that fabric will exist between patient and physicians in between visits?
Yeah, I think it's super important to make sure that you've got really reliable data sources, feeding these tools, and a diverse set of data sources. Certainly you want peer-reviewed literature, but you also want things like clinical guidelines, stuff coming from the CDC, from WHO, from FDA, if they're in the US, but all using RAG. Certainly you want to have retrieval augmented generation where you're using a vector database of trusted sources. But you also want to make sure that you are being clear with whoever the user is when there's a level of uncertainty with those models. So certainly you want to be explaining reasoning. And certainly there's a threshold where maybe you don't want the agent to go too far. So that may be where, I guess in the US, it would be where the device becomes software as a medical device. So where it provides diagnoses, that would be like certainly a threshold you want to step back from for a lot of these tools. But certainly you want to have clear citations in there, disclaimers, a level of transparency with the user. And then usually there's a place where human oversight steps in. So, you want the tool to provide a lot of the administrative, conversations, but then be able to escalate to human when it's necessary. So most of the time there are protocols in place where the message is forwarded to a live clinician. And that's certainly where we want to keep things, at least for now, where the technology is. But you want to be aligning it with local regulations. You want to make sure that it's not making speculative claims. So you want to be building in some guardrails and limits, and make sure that humans are certainly supervising and take over at certain points in the conversations. So, there's a lot of things that we need to be doing to make sure there are safeguards in place and that there's no misinformation. But it certainly starts with the training and fine tuning, and then the real life, monitoring when the device is being used.
So outside of that real life monitoring and human supervision, element, which obviously has its own, scalable limitations. What is there a way for these models to autonomously uh, interrogate or analyze itself to determine how uncertain or certain it is? And can you toggle that threshold to then kind of call itself out?
There is a level of metacognition that is happening with these models where they are able to essentially have two agents. One is the generative agent and the other is the more critical agent. And so it's able to generate something and then say, is this right? Can this be verified? So I think we're starting to see some of that. Is it perfect? No. Can it be 100% trusted? No, not right now. But it certainly starts with, there's these agents can reason, right? And that is part of, some self-reflection and checking itself is there, with, that multi-agent component.
For sure. And that's one thing that I've kind of seen or worry about. I don't know if you can speak on it, is a lot of these things we say are AI powered and AI, enabled and et cetera. But there's like a lot of human behind the scenes that, that again, with scalability and reproducibility, without that kind of human supervision, I don't know of any kind of score or guideline or metric when it comes to evaluating how much is human of this, point solution that's proposed to be an AI solution. Are you aware of anything like that? And is that one of your concerns as well, that may give it something an unfair rap, or, appear one way and turn out not to be the case when it's kind of scaled?
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on the setting in which it's being rolled out. So usually the local institution would have that kind of foresight and plan for how to keep the governance structure in place. So the governance structure would essentially say, if somebody mentions suicidality in a chatbot, you're gonna, that's gonna be the trigger for it to go to a human. But it could also be something a little lower risk. It could be, somebody reports that their injection site or their incision from surgery is red and inflamed, and there's indications of infection. So that threshold for level of monitoring and risk mitigation is all set usually by whoever's implementing that solution locally.
Talking about patient education, I've had the kind of disillusioning, or we'll call it humbling, realization that everything does need an ROI if it's going to cost something. And we know that LLMs and a lot of these AI tools and platforms even require big costs. I mean, technically, labor-wise, et cetera. So where do you see, and that's my biggest concern, where or how do you see it being justified to put that effort and energy into patients? One, they deserve it. Two, the data actually helps us understand science and especially cancer much better. So, I mean, it's incentivized in that way. But sometimes they'll be like, yeah, but in this quarter, this year, like, I just don't see that return. And there's just other things on the priority list. Have you come up with a clever solution on how that may be able to be the case?
I mean, you got to think of it as a 5 to 10 year time horizon, right? It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to see the ROI tomorrow. But when you think about these tools allowing folks to get diagnosed faster, when they are having better patient experiences, they're more likely to stay on whatever it is, that, there's better adherence to therapy. So there's ROI there, at least from my perspective from the pharmaceutical industry, but it's also the right thing to do, right? So it makes sense in many dimensions, right? And I think we will need to start measuring these things more closely, and it will be multidimensional. But adherence to therapy, earlier diagnosis, I think, are two main things that people from my perspective are concerned about and very interested in. And I think LLMs will help with that. How can we have patients be a better part of the loop so that those clinicians can better understand what they're going through sooner and get them referred in e-consults sooner to get the specialized care that they need much earlier down the line.
One of the things that I think about when it comes to like building trust and being transparent, et cetera, is that's 100% needed, the building the trust and the transparency, especially when you're talking about healthcare professionals and management of healthcare. But then I, me being very distant as a clinician from what you do, how much of that would involve or require kind of spilling the secret sauce or having the proprietary piece of this or part? I guess not as much of a concern, correct? Because you're actually building the model and training it in its own proprietary way.
It's more the design process is where you are, you're not handing over the code to patients when you're essentially having them, would you rather see this sort of, this option, just like when you're in ChatGPT and it says, here are two responses. Do you prefer this one or that one? How do you prefer to be communicated with? Do you prefer this language or that language? I mean, that's really where we're seeing patients be looped in, is more the UI UX.
One of the things I noticed on my speaking circuits when I have concluded the talk, I have an oncologist that comes and they're very enthusiastic. They're like, okay, I want to get started. I want to have AI, integrated or start, easing into it, crawl before run, crawl, walk, then run. But I know the lift is not always easy, especially if you're talking about accessing data locally, or having some kind of connection to that requires the data to then put out the output of the generative AI tool or whatever you're using. My question is, what are some of the challenges and a strategy, if you have one, on how we can comfortably implement AI solutions to the otherwise non-user?
I think it's about really having them be involved in the process, and it's about the messaging to them, right? You're not saying, I'm going to add something, an additional tool for you to log into. You're going to say, this tool is integrating into something you're already using. And you know what? It's going to make you more efficient. It's going to make you extend the reach of your care to reach more patients. It's going to personalize things for you. It's going to improve your responsiveness so you get back to messages quicker. And it's improving the standard of care that you're providing. So, they always talk about how, I always hear Isaac Kohane at Harvard talk about how even the lower end physicians who barely passed, medical examinations are then put on par with the higher end physicians who are, providing the exceptional care. So it's the great equalizer. I feel like it's just improving everyone and making them better. And so it's all about the messaging. It's all about change management. Which isn't easy. It's easier said than done. And I've been doing it for the last 5 years. And it's all about, having those real simulations where people actually use the product so that they can become familiar with it and comfortable with it and begin liking it.
How do you make the product grow? Like as we learn, sure, you could go back to the guidelines and make sure they're up to date. But as we learn more and expand our knowledge, and you don't maybe have the same volume or amount of data sets to contextualize this new scientific stuff and understanding, how does it need just kind of a software update, or do you feed it? Do you take it out, put it back in? Does it grow? I know it varies if it grows with you or not. How do you see us, addressing that as our scientific understanding explodes?
Yeah, certainly you're continuously monitoring the product for drift and model drift, but there's also new data sources now that we're just now tapping into. So essentially most LLMs right now, or baseline LLMs, have scraped the internet, right? But that's mostly like textual information. And so now there's the opportunity. I know Ilya Sutskever has talked about how like multimodality or training LLMs on videos and genes and certainly photos, et cetera, pathology slides, all of that is going to open up a new, at least step level change in the amount of training data that we can give these systems. So I think we haven't tapped out all of the available training data yet. We will get there. But multimodality is certainly the next era of training these systems so that they're even smarter.
Do you feel, or have you experienced that there may be some resistance on the behalf of providers and physicians for the generative AI explanations and resources to patients? Because I know, and I've met some, I always welcome the paper that's out of the purse, that says, hey, what about this? Because I want to placate any concerns. I don't want anyone to think they're missing something, and get the explanation they need to move on or to adopt it if I don't know something. But I know not everyone loves that. Like in Dr. Google world, this is a whole nother level of that, and very arguably much less wrong and probably more contextually accurate. How have you, if at all, seen the reception of that, or I guess percentage wise, and how do you overcome that if that is a concern?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you include references to the origin of the information in the text. So you have the citations there, you have them be hyperlinks that are clickable to the original content so that the person digesting that content, the clinician in your example, can verify for themselves that, this is a reputable source. Let me understand more about the clinical trial behind these claims or series of clinical trials, the clinical development pathway. That is where I think these tools can be helpful for clinicians to do their own validation. They're not just looking at a metric, an F1 score or an AUC, anything like that. They are actually looking at the origins of the data themselves to make their own call, if they're that speculative.
Yeah.
Which,
Well,
they
I mean
should be
more
because
so.
their reputation's on the line a lot of
I mean
times.
more so the concern of overwhelming a physician with accurate,
Yeah,
correct. I mean,
right.
it's already 7 to 7, like just to see the patients, and that's not even starting your notes at 10 p.m. So now you have 25 patients that also have a ton of information that's nuanced to a general oncologist because they're all top level experts,
Yeah.
of the reports. How do you navigate that?
What I think is really cool is Epic has come out with this lookalikes recently, especially in the rare disease population. There's not a lot of data that exists to begin with, and especially for patients that are the exact one that you are seeing in front of you. And so I think that's where the beauty of AI shines is like, hey, there's somebody who was just like this 2,000 miles away that was treated and they had this outcome. I think that's where AI is going to really give us new insights on these really unique edge cases, and allow the physician to be more confident in treating them. So it's not necessarily the population health insights, but I think where AI is going to shine is these edge cases, and like I said, bringing in the lookalike data.
How far away do you think we are from that being equitable or readily accessible?
Well, I know they're rolling it out within Epic, so that's a pretty large, EHR system. I think it has to do with each institution buying, the next offering that Epic is giving them. So it really depends on what the institution wants to put in their infrastructure. But certainly there's competitors out there that are doing like real world observational studies at the point of care as well, which is a really cool idea. So AI is being used in many different ways to improve the point of care, especially in these instances where there's not a lot for the clinician to go on. And so I'm really hopeful about, the company's called Atropos Health. I'll just call them out, out of Stanford. But yeah, they're doing bringing in real world data at the point of care is amazing.
What is one
Or
of
Atropos Health. Sorry, I think I pronounced their name wrong.
What is your biggest concern on why the solutions and improvements that AI can bring to healthcare may be unnecessarily protracted, held up, or delayed? Um, yeah. What is one or two? What are one or two reasons you think that it could be unnecessarily delayed before we see the benefits of what AI can bring patients
Well,
and physicians alike?
certainly we're pending robust regulation. We saw some really, we've seen efforts to start regulation, and certainly the FDA is starting to become wiser to this and bring in more experts. But are we there yet with the regulation that we need, the smart regulation? No. And there's also the gap between federal regulation and state regulation. And in the absence of federal regulation, we're seeing states come up with a patchwork of different criteria that is state by state. And so I know that's a very US-centric approach or thought process, but obviously here. So that's, what I'm most concerned about. In the absence of federal regulation, we're just seeing kind of this patchwork. I mean, California is leading the way, obviously. But then you've got even my state, Colorado, coming up with regulation as well. And so my fear is that we won't move fast enough on the federal level President Trump seems to want to, roll back some of the safety net stuff that Biden put out. So we'll see where we end up. But I think regulation is the first thing, and then implementation science. So these systems cannot be rolled out in a vacuum. They have to have a certain level of customization at the local level. And my fear is that a lot of these local institutions don't have that infrastructure. They don't have a governance board. They don't have the expertise in-house to do this model drift monitoring. And so we're putting the burden unnecessarily on some of these local institutions who don't have the resources to continue to make sure that these systems are working properly.
Is there a solution to that? Because I would imagine a lot of the community health
Yeah.
centers don't know how to assess drift.
Well, certainly Chai came out with the idea that they were going to certify, certain health institutions that would look at your models for like a third party, accreditation process. I think they might have backed down from that, the latest I heard. And so, yeah, it's a real problem with, equity, trying to figure out, of course, the, academic health centers have the infrastructure in place, and the Stanfords and Harvards of the world could do this. But can your local health system do that? Probably not. And so how do we share best practices from those who have really gone through this process? Certainly Mayo is, leading the way, and they've come up with and certainly CHAI, the Coalition for Healthcare AI, has come up with a lot of best practice documentation to help those folks who are at these small centers put some infrastructure in place. So there's some guidance, but in terms of actual resources, that's where I worry, the funding, et cetera. You can all have access to best practice document, but that will only take you so far.
Do you have any real concern that the gap between academic care, like let's just say in the area of cancer, but really anything, rheumatology, whatever, the gap is going to be only more broadened or significant between academic centers that can have these kind of things in place and IT and CIOs to be able to understand and deliver this properly compared to local health centers, which at least in cancer, 85% of the community or of the cancer patients are treated at a community facility. Is that a concern? And have you heard of anything to potentially address that?
Absolutely, it's a concern. How do we improve the local neurologists to make them on par with the specialist neurologist who sees these really rare cases and does has all the equipment to do the specialized workup, to improve the clinician, to really standardize how they're asking the right questions to the specialist. So even clinician to clinician, I think there's a area for LLMs to help really sharpen the communication to make sure it's efficient, that it's distilling the things that are most important. But yeah, I absolutely worry that this is probably already the case, that there is a disparity between academic medical centers and the local care providers. And this is where I think, or I hope, that AI will help level the playing field within the next 5 to 10 years. It will make those local clinicians be on par or have at least access to the right information and data in real time to really make sure that they are as efficient as possible and as clear in how they are referring patients to the right facilities that are needing extra attention.
Can you walk us through, I mean, you have so much expertise on kind of the, A to Z, end to end, like discussions about AI adoption and then actual implementation and execution, if that's the right word. Who are the people that matter? What does that kind of timeline look like? The CIO, like you mentioned, is it a CTO? Is it, I'm sure legal is a big part of it. Who are the people at a healthcare institution that are usually involved, and is there an order to it, or are they all in the same room at the same time?
Yeah, so there are governance bodies who have folks from all over the institution on that board that meet to review ongoing projects. I think the most overlooked players are And I'll take Stanford as another example. The Stanford Emerging Applications Lab. They're the folks actually doing the prototyping. They're the ones actually interviewing the clinicians and the patients and doing the clinical trials to improve the implementation science. So certainly it's multidisciplinary. There needs to be somebody from, a lot of different parts of the organization around. And certainly ethics needs to be present as well. But yeah, then those folks that actually go to roll it out, that go to train the trainer folks, they also need to be in the loop as well. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that there are infrastructures in place, at least academic health centers, that can be kind of a beacon for what good looks like, and they can share their best practices, like I said, through some of these consortia. To get the word out about what's working and what's not working so that people don't reinvent the wheel.
What are a couple of the things that you're most excited about on this advent, maybe 5 years from now, which I know it's almost impossible to conceive, but in an ideal world, what would you be most excited about to see?
I think we'll start to move past AI as, an administrative assistant and into more of the true intern, where you're offloading some of, your workload onto an agent that really understands you, that has the personal context on you and what your goals are as a company, to your corporate objectives. It's really integrated in all your systems. So we just saw OpenAI is now integrating with Google's suite of, services. And I think that true integration of, you don't have to go here, then here, then here. You have everything in one place. You have, your brain essentially offloaded to an AI who's perfectly trained on everything that you know to make you better. So certainly not replacing clinicians, replacing, anybody in the company, but, allowing you to have more accessible information, for you to have deeper engagement with your patients, and then certainly making the care delivery process more personal and more connected. I think that's the healthcare future that I'm really excited about. It's going to be beyond, the cookie cutter. This is X patient, and so they get Y therapy. It's going to be, we've done all this genetic screening. We're putting that data together with your CT scans and all your medical history information. And there's 10 different sources of information, different types of multimodal information coming in to get personalized insights for the patient to have personalized therapy then. So even the dose, for example, would be very personalized. Because of that lookalike patient like me functionality, you could say, well, this might cause more side effects, and so I'm going to also combine it with this other therapy. There's more flexibility in the care delivery process as well. In addition to the personalization.
How does generative AI deliver personalized patient education and improve medical information accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just translating language. I think it's helping to translate meaning, right? It's helping people really be equal partners at the table who have this lingua franca, that they are, then speaking the same language as their clinician, and then therefore can have a one-to-one conversation in which that patient is an equal partner. And it's really elevating the dialogue, right? So before, patients were such a passive part of the exchange. And I remember, a lot of times still having white coat syndrome in front of my own physician, where they would be off talking, trying to explain something to me, and I just wasn't absorbing it. But now, patients can feel more empowered to feel a part of the process, to really dig probing questions, and sometimes even question the thought process of their clinician. So it's going to change the dynamic between the patient and clinician in the future. And I think that's warranted. It's been far too long that patients have just been sort of terrified in this experience, trying to absorb all the information, furiously taking notes. Now they will have their own record of the visit in their language, in their lingua franca, and they will be able to really be pensive about how they want their care delivery trajectory to go. They can challenge, the clinician, and they can make sure that they're receiving the care that they deserve.
Oh, I just love that. That's so exciting. We talked about how, trust is earned with physicians and healthcare systems. How do AI health companions boost patient engagement and patient self-care, medication adherence, etc.? A lot of times things are offered, but sometimes deferred on. How does that, culture change?
I think there's the gamification component. There's the nudging component. So you're constantly being reminded, and you can toggle that off, right? Like a lot of these can be very annoying. And so it's giving the patient the information in the way they want to receive it, when they want to receive it. Okay, I want to schedule an update from my agent to give me an update on all of my stats at 8 a.m. every morning. That patient can say, I want to toggle it off, or I want it to be in this graph. I want to see it in a specific way. So whatever is most helpful to them, they will have the agency to really shape the messaging or delivery of information in the way that they feel like what's most helpful for them. We've seen now Sam Altman, partner with some hardware folks. And so thinking through, well, currently we're integrating wearables and that kind of thing, but what's the devices of the future that are going to be ambient listening? How are we going to integrate all these different form factors into a single agent or agents to really improve the baseline for each person to be able to navigate their day and make the best decisions for themselves. I've laughed at a lot of the form factors that I've seen prototypes of. I think they're hilarious. They're like a necklace. It's like, I don't know that I see myself wearing that as a patient, but some people will. Some people will wear the glasses. Some people will have that augmented reality of the information in their field of view. And that's kind of what's coming next, right? Like, it sounds goofy now, but augmented reality will become more normalized for us in our everyday lives, whether it's driving, whether it's in any mode of transportation, or just, looking at a computer screen. Sam Altman has kind of told us that computers, or like the laptop or desktop, are kind of things of the past. And so having that agent with us in our everyday lives and integrated into everything that we do is going to be something that happens in the future. And we're starting to see more conversational interfaces and sharing of a computer screen for real live input. And so it's just infiltrating everything, whether we like it or not. And it's interesting to think about what the future, what's coming towards us. It's coming very fast. I really hope that regulatory environments really come up to the plate and are really, put a lot of foresight into what we want regulation to be. We don't want to over-regulate. We don't want to stifle innovation, but we also want to make sure that people are safeguarded. I don't think Jeffrey Hinton has probably the starkest premonitions for what's to come, and I don't think I'm quite at his level of trepidation, but I still think that we need to be on our toes and not on our heels for what's to come, and be very, forward thinking in how we put regulations in place and guardrails, and just make sure that we have the patient and the end user in mind, and that we have responsible AI.
Well, what regulatory bodies, when it comes to health and AI, what are a couple? Do they pre-exist? Are they coming together now? Like, who, is that something that's just kind of chasing the tail? Like, I mean, not chasing the tail, but precipitating as these models are coming out fast. Who's going to make those things happen?
I mean, right now it's the FDA in the US, but we've seen people like the NHS in England come out with some guidance documents lately that say, if you are integrating AI into your health record, that is a medical device. So that is not how we have defined medical devices in the US. They take a much stricter, more conservative stance on that. But, the NHS being who they are, that's going to set a precedent for the rest of us in the world. And we're going to have to tighten the reins on what's a medical device when we roll it out to those other countries. And so it's going to have a ripple effect. And certainly there's GDPR, and, Europe is a lot more conservative in, privacy and all that stuff. So, you just really need to be cognizant of where you're rolling out and have essentially different solutions in each geographic area. I hate that that's the case, but we haven't had much harmonization at this point internationally.
Emily, thank you so much for your insights and you continuing to kind of pioneer this space for us. If there's anything we can do, let us know. But is there anything that's a parting advice? Just it sounds like be prepared, not necessarily in a bad way, but just don't be blindsided
Be
and
learning
think
every
of the
day, you know.
optimistic.
There's so much, get an RSS feed because there's a lot of news to keep up with. There's, I have ChatGPT give me my daily news brief on AI in healthcare. I think have these discussions kind of be ubiquitous in your everyday life. If you're riding on a highway, make sure you're listening to a podcast. I think, and making sure that you're looking at the right information sources too. There's lots of scare tactics out there. There was a recent study that came out at MIT, I believe it was, about how ChatGPT is making us dumber. And, I certainly disagree with news and headlines like that. I think if used in the right way, AI can make us smarter and can make us more efficient and more intelligent and make better decisions. I certainly hope that that's not true, that we're not just becoming lazy, but that we are actually becoming more superhuman in a way, and that we're able to extend our reach, be better at what we do, and be more caring, compassionate humans because of AI.
Amazing. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.